Well, welcome to our panel, Don't Fear a Red Planet. My name is Dr. Lee Francis Guatihapa. My family's from the Pueblo of Laguna, and I am the CEO and owner of Red Planet Books and Comics, the only Native American and Indigenous comic shop, Native-centric, Native-owned in the world. So very excited to have this panel going on and the panelists that I have with me to be able to talk about Red Planet and where we came from, what we've got planned, and how we envision an indigenous, a more indigenous world. So if you want to introduce yourselves, Najoni, I'll let you start.
Hi, Yate. My name is Najoni. I am Dene and Quechua, calling in from Los Angeles, but from the Navajo Nation, Tucson, Arizona. And I am the assistant project manager at Red Planet.
Excellent. And Aaron?
I'm Aaron Cuffey. I'm Montauk and Shinnecock, and I'm here at Red Planet Books and Comics in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I am partners with Lee. I'm the Chief Creative Officer and Chief of Operations for Red Planet Books and Comics.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for joining me on this wonderful, I don't know when we're filming, digital virtual panel day. We'll just say it that way. And then I'll just kind of blank and someone can insert whatever day we are actually on. So yeah, so I think I'll start out right now. I want to talk with you all about your experiences, and I got some questions, but I'll start out with the history of Red Planet. And Aaron, I can let you chime in a little bit on this one as well. But Red Planet itself started from it sprang to life from the work that we had been doing already around Native comics. So in 2014, I founded Native Realities, which was a Native pop culture company producing comics, graphic novels, games, toys, and collectibles, really to focus on representation and indigenous representation within the pop culture world and the pop culture industry. And not just sort of the standard representation, because Native peoples have been present in American pop culture for 400 years. But I think when I first started the company, the idea was that it was a much more authentic, dynamic representation. So it was the types of things where you had superheroes that looked more like, more like me, and not just, with feathers and headdresses and all the rest, but that looked like Pueblo kids, right? That looked like they came out of New Mexico. I wanted to see more authentic stories that represented Native people from all over, from the East Coast, and not just our Western relatives, but also our Eastern relatives, because their stories are deep and profound as well. And so Native Realities was the only way I could think how to kind of make social change was to create comics and create more comics. And so I started writing comics and working with Native comic creators and the folks that we could, enlist to be able to put a lot of this stuff together with me in those first couple of years. Aaron was one of those guys. I dragged you into this being like, you want to make comics with me? Free? And I'll just be nice. I'll give you a hug from time to time. And I hope that'll satisfy you until I can actually pay you later at some point. So, I drug you into that work, which I have always said, I have been eternally grateful that you decided to come along on this crazy ride. Shortly after that, about 2 years later, I had the crazy idea of starting the Indigenous Comic-Con and decided to launch that, and realized that it was a huge endeavor and we had some great folks. But afterwards, we had all of this stuff, banners and posters and signs and autograph things and comic books and books of, and books and all this stuff that people had like gifted and left and, kind of wanted to find another life for. And I didn't have a lot of space at my house anymore. And so I started looking around saying, well, why don't we keep this party going year round and let's open up a shop? Because I've always kind of wanted to open up a bookstore. And we we're coming up on we passed our anniversary, our 4th anniversary, June 2017. We opened up Red Planet Books and Comics in West downtown Albuquerque, New Mexico. At the time, it's still tiny, but at the time it was pretty much just like, I think, what did we have? 5 bookshelves.
Yeah.
I enlisted you at that point. I was like, okay, I think I got money now. You want to come in and do this? And I was like, you want to paint stuff and make things pretty? And you were like, okay, that's fine. So, I remember those first, I think, what did we have, about 3 months? Was that right? Because I think we decided we were going to move in March, April, May. No, April. It was April.
Yeah, it was pretty quick.
Yeah. And then kind of put you, I think I put you to work, and, and you painted the walls and, built the place, essentially. And so, there it is. 4 years later, here we are, rode the storm of, a pandemic, kept our doors open once they were able to be open again, but we kept shipping and we kept bringing more comic books and more native books and more games to all those indigenous out there. So here we are in 2021 with this wonderfully funky, cool little shop. So did I get that right, Aaron? Is that how you remember it? When I dragged you into the first part of that? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the only, as far as you tricking me, I think the funniest part to me is we've been friends long before any of this came to fruition, a decade at least. But the humor I constantly find in it, because I love what we do. I think it's great, and we do a dozen different things. But initially it was about, hey, we're gonna make comics and we're gonna print these things and do stories, and we do. But Red Planet sort of came out of, let's also have a store and do retail and sell things and go brick and mortar. And that's been great, but also was a bit out of left field as far as like, oh, okay, yeah, let's do that too. Let's also, which I love about you, Lee, is sort of, I tell people when they ask about the nature of our relationship within the business, I say, well, Lee has a bit of like entrepreneurial ADD. He has a lot of exciting ideas, and a lot of those ideas need to happen now, which has led to a dozen amazing things that we do. So that's the only thing I'd add to the history, I guess.
That's about right. I'll take that. I think that's, I think partly for me, there's always been an urgency with this work, right? Because there's always, from my perspective, there tends to be a lot of chatter, but there's, it's that momentum, and it's that drive. It's the fact that, now, since we started this in 2014, 5-6 years later, and having this comic shop, what are we seeing? Well, now we're seeing Marvel picking up so many of these artists that we knew prior to this work, that had been illustrators, that had been in the industry, but the big companies weren't really, I'll say it directly, paying attention, right? Because we had these comic artists and these folks that were in these spaces, and they weren't really shining a light. But we start IPX, and did formerly Indigenous Comic Con, now Indigenous Pop Expo, and when we put that together and brought all these folks in, it started to, it was like this blossoming, right? And I think that ultimately is where I come from, when my entrepreneurial ADD of, like, we need to do this thing because I can see the necessity for this, right? It's great when we create content, but unless there's a place to find that content, unless there's a place that is known enough for that content that hey, Red Planet's got a new release, you're not going to find it. It's going to be something small, or it's going to be somebody working, slinging their stuff to the small comic shops, but not enough people know about that. And I think that was really why that momentum for me, and that constancy of just saying, like, okay, let's do this thing now. Okay, let's do this thing now. Because I don't think there's enough time to wait. There's with Native folks and Indigenous identity. I think that's been one of our biggest goals, right? We're going to try and change things as fast as we can. Njoni, I dragged you into this on a different project, which I think we're going to be talking about in another panel. But I think you told me at one point where you saw me, and you were just like, and I posted on, social media. I was like, we're looking for some people to help, and you saw me on an interview, and then you decided to jump on board to this crazy train. So
Yeah, I watched your interview for actually the official Star Wars Lucasfilm YouTube channel, where you talked about your Native identity and how that coincides with pretty much a lot of things that go on in Star Wars, specifically being the Force, and that spiritual aspect of how we, operate as Indigenous people. I think since joining the team this past year, the coolest thing for me to see is not only Indigenous representation, but further representation in pop culture. So, like our Afro-Indigenous relatives, our gay relatives, our trans relatives, Red Planet really strives to include all people, and that means all people. And so it's been really inspirational. Like right now, the work that we're doing focuses on an Afro-Indigenous water protector, and the work that we've been doing prior, really calls in all of our relatives.
And I think it's been great, having you on board, because I think a lot of the times what I have enjoyed about Red Planet and what we do is that it's a place where we all get to nerd out, or indigent nerd out, right? Where we get to just kind of talk about the things that we love in a way where we don't have to like, I don't have to come in and be like, I'm Native. Nice to meet you. This is my family, and I also like Star Wars, or I also like comic books. It's like it's part and parcel of who we are. And I think, Aaron, when we opened the doors, that was one of the main things that we looked at. It's not that we had the stuff on the shelves, that are primarily Native, that you can't find and Indigenous, that you can't find anywhere else, and any other location or comic shop outside, like maybe a tribal museum or something, but not in a consolidated space. But that we also were there for the community, because Native nerds also like just general nerd stuff. They're like, yes, I want to read Iron Man and I want to read Spider-Man. Oh, and there's this thing too. And I feel like what we try to do is really privilege both of them, right? So that Iron Man is right next to, Ghost River or the Heroes or Hero Twins or whatever. So the comics that we found, the comics that we've created, have a place of honor right alongside all of the mainstream stuff. And I will point to you, because I know that was one of the things that we talked about early, but you had a particular vision about how we would start stacking our shelves. So, especially coming out of the pandemic, or during the pandemic, and, and leaving out of that, you have done a marvelous job. So talk to me a little bit about, what you had in mind in terms of building out our collections and the shelving itself.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been a collector since 1990. So I've got 30 years of comic reading and collecting and toys, not so much games, but being really invested as a nerd myself, while at the same time having a cultural life. Yeah, as a Indigenous person, as a mixed person with Black and European heritage, etc., dealing with all of that, as we've talked about a lot, and as I went to school for, and then getting involved in this. On the creative side, the interest was in representation, was in qualitative representation. Like you were saying, Natives have always been present in pop culture, in the stories that people are telling, but it's not about just being there. It's about what story's being told and who's telling the story. And when we were setting up the store and the shelves, the same is true. And for me, as a geek from childhood, I look at it as like, okay, well, what is our shop gonna look like when someone comes and looks at the shelves? Because yeah, you can go to any LCS and see Spider-Man, and you can see Batman, and you can see the latest Image title guaranteed. And if you come in here, you can find it too, as long as I have people that are interested. But the only things I can guarantee you are that anything that a Native creator is producing is gonna be here. Any new thing that's coming out of BIPOC community, LGBTQIA+, that women creators are doing, who have been marginalized and not prioritized in LCSs in my entire lifetime. Like, that's part of the reason I think about is I spent 30 years collecting books, and until adulthood, I wasn't curating based on who was creating and the nature of the story being told. I was just looking at what characters did I like, maybe what writer or artist I cared about. And when I was at my youngest, I'm like, is the character blue? Because I like blue, so I want blue characters. And I think that's how kids and people get into things. To start with, like you were saying, indigenous nerds are indigenous, but they're also just nerds if you separate it out. And as an indigenous nerd, the nerd part of me started with blue flying, to be like, that dude is blue and he flies. I like that. And that carried me forward 30 years to then being like, okay, but where does he come from? What is his or her story? Who's telling the story? And the same goes for all of our shelves. I mean, there's in Albuquerque, because that's where we're physically based outside of the online space, there's 6 other local shops. That's plenty of competition. Some of them are far more established than us when we opened and now still. But none of them, and I've shopped at all, none of them, in my opinion, prioritized or even cared about independent books, about books by creators of color or queer creators, that women specifically were telling their own stories and trying to orient the nature of superheroes away from cheesecake or non-superhero stories towards a woman's perspective. None of them were going for local indie stuff, zine-based little comic strip comic books that are starting from a place of passion, and who knows where they'll go. Because, and if you ask them, as with any number of comic shop owners, they turn around and they go, it doesn't sell. Nobody wants it. And because of us publishing and because of us having a specifically dedicated mission for indigenous people, we've had a lot of leeway to wait for things to sell, to build the sales, to turn around and say, well, this is an amazing book that isn't getting a lot of push because it's not a traditional seller. It doesn't have film options. The TV show's not coming out, but we're going to push it to every single person who comes through the door and all of our people online, because this creator from the res in Wyoming or Alaska or up in Canada who has no ability to create their own press or create their own market, we've put ourselves in a position to do it for them because that's what we do.
That's, I think, fundamental. I think that's, I mean, we've had decades of conversations about that at this point. You know, we're stretching into, 3 separate decades, although, we've known each other for about 2, but, starting from where we were originally having these conversations. And I think that that's necessary and needed, as I talk about just in the bookstore and the book selling, not even the comic shop, but book selling. It's what gets front faced, right? What gets privileged? Where does it go? And I think with Red Planet, we wanted to make a definite stand and a definite mark of saying, we're the comic shop for Indian country. And in Albuquerque, we're the comic shop that you can go to find stuff that's not going to be in this space. And you and I both love comic shops. So it doesn't mean that I'm just like, oh, well, this is the everybody has to do. I was like, no, that's the whole point. It's you have a co-op and you have a Walmart. They don't have to do the exact same thing.
I was literally just talking to a customer, called in 2 days ago, asking about not our stuff specifically, but asking about Black Mask Comics, Black Mask Studios, because he had gone to 2 or 3 other comic shops locally, set up subscriptions for some Marvel titles, for some DC stuff, but asked about some Black Mask titles because he'd read Black and he'd read Cal Exit and a couple of things and thought they were doing really good work and wanted to get singles, wanted to start a subscription, and was told specifically by those shops, we don't order them because they don't sell, and also I don't like them. By whoever he was talking to. I think they don't enjoy the narrative style or the political nature of what Black Mask is putting out, I would assume. And on the phone, I told him immediately, I was like, we love Black Mask, and we love them because those people don't, or some people don't. There is no those people, but some segment of society looks at what Black Mask is doing or looks at what we're doing or some portion of what Drawn and Quarterly and Fantagraphics does, and let alone completely independent producers, but they see those things and the artistic risks that those people take or the level of production value that they see, and they say, we're not going to carry that. And I, as someone who's curating a lot of what we get, do the exact opposite. Sometimes to, a sales detriment. I've definitely picked some things that didn't work out for us, but my motivation, more than pushing those sales as hard as possible, is to say, no one else is going to have this, so whoever wants it will have to come to us. And then we can show them 100 other things that they've never seen or heard of. Like you said, a lot of Native comics that no one else has. No one, let alone Tribal Gift Shop, other locations. We're the only ones that have them. And then international comics, etc. And it's real important. Yeah.
And I think it goes back to an old model of trying to, pull in those types of things. I mean, prior to the pandemic, I was traveling more and finding these local things in local shops. We carry things that you can't find because it was just old import export. I just load it up in a suitcase and bring it back to our shop. Things from Australia or New Zealand or Hawaii. I think we just brought in Guam, Chamorro comics, right, from Guambus. I'm like, this is like, I think that's exactly what we offer. And looking at, these spaces of like places like Black Mesa, I was like, cool, you don't have to like it. That's cool. There are places that do. There's places like us where you can find that. And I think that's even the mantra, like, don't fear Red Planet, because there's so much cool stuff to be there. Nijoni, I know that you have not had that. We've been pandemicized, so you have not had the chance to wander around and make comic book angels on our shop floor. But I would like to. You know what we do. You've been with us for several months now. It's more of a general question. Just knowing that we have this shop, what does that mean to you? Because you are a huge Indigenerd, right? That's one of the best parts. Like you got your stuff in your lower right hand / left hand corner, which is, I think, one of the first things I saw when I was interviewing you, because we had to do it Zoom wise, and I was like, nice curtains, and it was like
Yeah.
Mandalorian Baby Yoda curtains, and I was just like, I told Aaron, I was like, I think we might have found a person that at least aligns with our interest.
It was
Yeah.
Christmas time. We
Yep.
had our interview like in the first part of January, and I still had my tree up, and Baby
That's
Yoda
right.
was my tree topper.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what does it mean to you to have a place like Red Planet, just, not only working for us, but just in general, as you kind of separate yourself and being sort of the Indigenerd public, like, to know that something like this is here?
Yeah, it's incredible. I've never had a space other than my own family to talk with Indigenous people about all of this nerd stuff. And I think that it was so powerful when Cuff or Aaron, we call him Cuffy, when he asked for like staff picks, and it was cool that I was like, oh, I really, really like Deer Woman, but also you could put anything X-Men. That's just cool. It's cool that we, are supporting people that are telling their stories, but we're also, huge nerds. Like I love Star Wars. That is like my whole world. Aaron liked things that were blue and flying. I liked women. Any girl that I saw, alien or not, I was like, that's me. Rey, even in these sequels, which we won't even get into, that's me. She's Indigenous to me. Baby Yoda, he's our Indigenous baby that we all want to just take care of, and grandma. So yeah, it's been really nice to be on the team, meet lots of people that we just nerd out with.
So in terms of, what do you think having something like Red Planet is important for, in terms of like, the next generation, right? These kiddos, and especially Native kiddos, right? Native and Indigenous kiddos, knowing that a place like our shop exists.
Right. our children are so valued in our communities. Children, just in general, have such a unique perspective on the world. And I think that, you know, my nieces and my nephew, they really, I, I envy, you know, having something like Red Planet or being exposed to something like that is an experience that I didn't have. You know, the indigenous representation, even in something like Star Wars, was, you know, not explicit, but otherwise, you know, reduced to aliens, which I thought was all for as a child, and the BIPOC representation, you know, more generally, bad guys usually. So I think that, you know, to have something like this allows our children to dream, see themselves in all aspects of pop culture and not just tragedies. You know, we're always represented as Native people as, you know, how sad that those people were genocided, or how sad that, you know, this happens to these women of this community. And, you know, it is really sad. But a lot of us see ourselves in, you know, superheroes, in characters that, and we want to be represented, we want to dream, and we want to just exist, right? Not be a tragedy, not be a best friend character, but, you know, be front and center.
Nice. Well, I have lots of friends in here. They're all my best friends. This is great. So we're all characters. I think you struck on it, and I think it's that part of how do, even when we first developed just the publishing that we were doing, it was how do we spark and or unleash the indigenous imagination, right? It's how do we create a space where people can walk in and see themselves. I've had, you know, numerous customers, and I know you have too, Aaron, when they walk in and they look around, they're like, oh, there's this moment of realization. I've had people bring in friends that, you know, Native friends that have brought, you know, they're like, you have to come see this. They just like pull them in, and they're just like, and then their friend is looking around being like, I never knew something like this could exist. And I think that's been that's been the most beautiful moments for me in all the work that we've done, you know, is to be able to have a home and a location where people can walk in, especially Native people, but anybody. I don't even want to say it's not like we're an exclusively like, well, you have to say a secret, you know, a Native word in your traditional language, and then you can get in the door. I'm like, we're not a speakeasy, we're a comic shop. We want everybody to come in, right? I think this is, again, this panel is Don't Fear a Red Planet. Come on in and see those things that you probably are not going to see in other locations. Aaron, I mean, one of the things I told you, you know, over this pandemic and what you've been able to put together, you know, I kept like, because I, you know, I'd come in and I'd check out the shop and I was like, wow, we got so much good stuff that I want to read. It's the shop that I think we've always wanted to create. It's a shop where I walk in, I was like, all of these books look great. There's, you know, that's queer books, and people have got, and there's our Latinx, and oh, there's Asian American API. Oh, we got the Chamorro. This is amazing, because I think I have been exposed to comic shops for so long that at a certain point, I also say there's just like, there's only so many Iron Men I'm going to be able to absorb, right? Or so many, you know, Spider-Man I'm going to be able to absorb. I want to see new writing, and I think Red Planet builds out a space for these new stories, right? And creates a location where that can happen. You know, so what are you gonna say?
Well, and I was gonna say, I don't want to stand up bagging on comic shops too much.
No.
Just because, no, of course not. But like, I love every LCS that I've been dedicated to in my life. I still have a place in my heart for them. Although now that we have our own shop, I can take care of myself. So I just stop in to look at things. But I think, and I know many of them that I go to work really hard to do what lots of places do, which is, here's our shelf of Black creators, and here's our shelf of gay titles, or any number of different representative demographics that they've chosen to give space to. And well, obviously that's not a perfect system. I do think that that's progress compared to lots of places. So I think they deserve some level of credit for it. I think what I really enjoy about what we do, or at least my attitude going into it, is I want us to be completely inverse from them, in the sense of, yeah, here's a shelf where you can find Iron Man, Batman, Spider-Man, whatever. But it's the shelf. It's the single part of the bookshelf. All the rest of it, yeah, is going to be indigenous, minority creators, AAPI, Black creators, queer creators, women authors, indie stuff that can't be found in other places. And I mean, at this point, we've got a dozen shelves, a dozen plus shelves in the store, at least on the sales floor. And I'm just proud of the fact that you can come in and 11.5 of our dozen shelves are indie creators, smaller voices, community, lower representation creators on the shelves across the board. And I have had, I mean, I think I personally have lost us some customers who come in and be like, hey, are you getting Batman Fortnite? And our general answer is, I'll order it for you. I'll get, like, if you want one, I can get it for you to bring it in, but we don't put that up on our shelves as a regular thing. You know, every weekly order isn't going to have the hottest title in the top 10 going up on the shelf, unless I have somebody who's asked for it, because what's going to go up on the shelf is Dakwakata Warriors, Sacred Circles, you know, 150 Years Retold, Ghost River, Tales of the Mighty Code Talkers, the Hero Twins, Hero, Six Killer, etc., ad nauseum, which are all indigenous titles that in a perfect world, I'd be like, everybody's heard of those. But we're aware enough to go, no, they haven't. The people who've heard of them have heard of them from us and the people who made them. And that's it. And to widen that, yeah, you need a store that's going to go, no, that's what's on the shelves. That's what's covering 95% of our sales floor is these things.
Yeah. No, I think that's we've continued to pursue the mission that we set out. We are mission driven, we are mission oriented within Red Planet, and I think that we've continued to build a heck of a shop. So I got one last question for both of you. As we do this, Nijoni, it's the question. So why should we not fear a red planet?
Because it's not scary at all. It's cool and it's inclusive and it's welcoming. It's family.
Awesome. Aaron, same question.
I think you should fear a red planet. I think in the sense that if your instinct is to be scared of the phrase red planet or indigenous focused or BIPOC or marginalized communities or minority representation or diversity, if that's scary, if you fear that, be afraid. But the intent, as Nijoni explained, as you've explained, is still abundantly clear. This is a wide open space and idea where everyone is not just welcome, but like heartily encouraged, like, hey, come in, because this is cool stuff. You should get in here and not be afraid. But on a personal level, for me, not professionally, not speaking for the company or anything, but if you're the type of person who fears things like that or fears change, don't come in.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for jumping on this wonderful panel with me. If anybody else wants to check us out, it's redplanetbooksandcomics.com. You can check us out, and we always encourage you to come join us. Don't fear Red Planet. You know, check it out because it's fun and it's delightful, and we like seeing people. So thank you all very much, and we'll see you in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Take care.